Let those who have two shoes sell one and buy a sword, and those who have two trousers should sell one and buy a sword, because now it is a time for revolution. And this revolution is no longer on the streets. This revolution is not about burning cars, but this revolution is in the mind. Because if the mind has not been transformed, if the mind has not been revolutionized, there is nothing we can do with our hands that will bring meaningful results to our lives. Peace and power, peace and blessing to all African families. From wherever you are today, on behalf of the African Continental Unity Party, we greet you and we welcome you to today's edition where we want to quickly discuss about some of the things that really make Africa stagnant. Some of the things that we have to understand, because when we don't understand them, we are inclined to make the very same choices that have eventually brought us to the same conditions in which we are today. So unless we understand these mistakes, these discrepancies, we will not be able to make informed choices and intelligent decisions, because at this moment we are at a time we can consider as a crossroads or crossroads. So sorry to say, the crossroads where we need to make choice, and the outcome of Africa in 10 years from now, in 20 years from now, in 50 years from now, in 100 years from now, the outcome of Africa at the end of this century, 21st century, will depend not on the amount of prayers that we are making. It's not going to depend on the amount of salads that we have addressed to Allah. It's not going to depend on the amount of choices and wish we have, but it will depend only on the quality of choices that we have made and the kind of actions that we have taken. That is what will define the future of Africa. We need to keep that sinking in our minds. The future of Africa will depend not on the prayers and fasting that we make, not on the number of salads that we make, not on the number of wishes and hopes that we have, but it's going to be based on the type of decisions, the quality of decisions that we have taken and the actions that we have made. That's very important for us to understand, because in life, we don't become what we pray for. We don't even become what we wish for, but we mostly become only what we have accomplished. And what we accomplish based on two things: based on the choice that we make, and also based on the actions that we undertake in order to become what we are willing to become. So it's very important for us to understand that the future of Africa is going to be designed by our accomplishments, individual as well as collective accomplishments as African people. So this discussion today is basically dedicated on the choices, because we have two choices in front of us as African people. Just as any oppressed people, they have two choices that they can use to treat or to deal with the situation of oppression they are facing. So the question is, are we in the situation of oppression today as African people? The answer is yes. And therefore, we have in front of us these two choices that we can choose one of them in order to eventually get rid or accommodate, in order to deal with the situation of oppression that we are facing. So before I proceed, I plead with you, please, this might be also your contribution to what we do within the African Continental Unity Party. So kindly, please share this video and like it, share with your contacts, so that the message of African Continental Unity Party, that we believe is the message of liberation of Africa, can obviously reach as many people as we want, so that we can all look at the reality from the same perspective, and from there we can be able to tackle the reality and see different results from our efforts. Now, Every time people are under oppression, they have two ways of dealing with that oppression. It's either they get comfortable with the oppression and they adjust themselves with the situation of oppression and then they go along with it like that, or they try to change that situation of oppression. Let me repeat that again. Every time people are in the situation of oppression or of domination, they have two ways of, of dealing with that situation. One is to accommodate themselves with the situation or with the conditions imposed upon them and making themselves comfortable within that situation, or I can call it creating their own small paradise in the hell to make themselves comfortable in that situation. But the other method is to eventually fight the situation of oppression in order to liberate themselves, in order to empower themselves and to rise again. Because when you look in the history of human beings, the history of modern society of human being, so to say, it has been the history of oppressed against oppressor, the history of conquered against conquerors, so to say. So that has been the reality of the world, and there will never gonna be a time when the world is free of this reality. Since different civilizations have come together to form what we call today a globalized society, the reality of our world will be always that reality of conflicts, whereby you have two entities. One is on top as a dominating entity, and another one is at the bottom as being dominated. And every time a nation or a people find themselves being dominated, they have two choices: either to become comfortable with the oppression and to deal with it in that way, or and adjust themselves to the oppressive conditions and go along with it, or to eventually find the means to fight against the oppressive system in order to change their reality. That is very important that we have to understand. And indeed, us as African people, we have always faced these two choices since the time of colonialism to the time that we embarked in the fight against colonialism in order to get what we call today commonly as the African independence. We have been facing these two choices, and even today we are still facing these two choices of either we get comfortable with the oppression that we are living under, or we fight the oppressive system and liberate ourselves. We're still having these two choices up until today, and they will remain until Africa changes its status quo to become indeed an emerging force and influential force in the world. But it all mostly depends on what is the willingness and the predisposition of African people. What we want? What is our predisposition? Because there is a price to pay. Whether you choose to accommodate yourself with the oppressive conditions that Africa finds itself under, or whether you decide to fight the system to bring Africa to a level where it emerges or it re-emerges as a global power base, there is a level of sacrifice that we need to make. Now, what is the first condition, which or the first choice that we have is an accommodation choice. It means we need to negotiate for freedom. We need to accommodate the will of the masters in order to acquire our freedom. And in most cases, we choose this option because we don't want to sacrifice a lot. We don't want to make important sacrifice to gain the real freedom that we want. But unfortunately, when you go through this means, you also indirectly sacrifice a lot of your rights without eventually knowing it. And that's reality. And that's where we are today. So when you study the developments of the history around 1960s, when Africans were actually fighting or demanding for independence, you will see that the majority of the African leaders actually choose or actually opted to go for accommodation freedom style. It means they chose to go for a freedom style that is based on negotiation, on accommodating the will of the masters, on finding the balance between what the masters wanted and what they wanted themselves. And by negotiating for your freedom, by accommodating the will of your master, which is actually to enslave you and to keep you under the condition of subjection, we have lost most of our rights. And I'm going to give you one example, particularly in Republic Central Africa, the Central African Republic, which was actually a French colony. When it came to negotiation for the so-called independence of that country, it was agreed. One of the deals that was struck between France and that country was that the country will get its independence, but the resources, the natural resources in that country will belong to France, including the resources that were not yet discovered at that time. If they had to be discovered, in the future, those resources were going to be belonging to France. And the Central African Republic was not allowed to strike a deal with other entity, either American or Chinese, for I don't know, for any kind of investment in the natural resources, unless France declines the offer. Unless France says, okay, we are not interested in this particular mineral that you have, then the country was now allowed to seek for other partners for the exploitation of that particular resource. So we, with this with this freedom style, which is accommodation freedom style, African nations, especially those who were colonized by France, lost a lot of their resources. Their resources were plundered. The resources were looted by France and its companies. And in matter of fact, when you look at French people don't have resources. And when you ask them, how comes that you don't have resources, but you are one of the superpower or the powerful nations in the world? You know what French will tell you, French people will tell you. They will tell you that, well, France does not have resources, but it having ideas. Well, that's very interesting. France does not have resources, but it having ideas. So it means whatever France is today, whatever development level that France has achieved as we're speaking right now, it's built not upon the resources, because France does not have natural resources, but it's based only on ideas, which means the capabilities of manipulating people, manipulating events in order to control people and their resources, and to build France itself at the expenses of African people. And this reminds me of one African leader, a former president of Gabon. His name was Omar Bongo. You know what he said? He said, Gabon without France is like a car without engine. But, no. He said, France without Gabon is like a car without engine. And Gabon without France is like a car without a driver. Can you imagine Gabon? That is a rich country with natural resources, including oil. This is coming from a leader who think that we, without France, we are like a car without a driver. It means for us as Gabonese people, for us to build ourselves, for us to develop, for us to be independent, we must follow the guidelines of France. France should be the one who shows us a way to follow. France should be the one who actually indicates the direction through which we're going in order to get our freedom. And when you look at the reality of local people in that country, despite all the resources that Gabon have, it's really amazing to find that people are poor, people are devastated. The condition of life, the social condition, economic condition for the local people is actually what we call in France precaire. There's a lot of precarity in that country, just as in other country in Africa that was a French colony. So this is to say that we have opted for an accommodation freedom style, which means that we didn't want to fight, but we wanted to negotiate our freedom with the masters or with the former oppressors. We wanted to negotiate the conditions of our freedom with the former colonizers and former oppressors. That is why, in most cases, we talk about the independence that we have obtained, or the independence that was given to us. Indeed, because this was given to us, this was a gift, but is nothing more than symbol which has no substance. It is a symbol of freedom which has no substance, the true substance of freedom that we wanted as African people. Because for one to be free, he must be able to look after himself. For one to be free, he must be able to feed himself. For one to be free, he must be able to educate himself. For one to be free, he must be able to defend himself. But in the case of Africa, we declare ourselves independent and we declare ourselves free, but we are still running to the very same people who oppressed us to be educated. Where on earth have you seen a strong person teaching you how to get rid of their power over you? Never gonna happen. This was the question asked by our ancestor John Henry Clark. A strong person can never teach you how to get rid of the domination of his power over you. That is something that you need to teach yourself. That is something that that is a kind of education that you need to educate yourself. And the best way to do it is to stand up, because as Dr. John Henry Clark said it, only a slave can abolish slavery. Because if you have somebody sitting on your back, it's only up to you to adjust yourself in order to balance the one who's sitting on your back. And the right position to take is to stand right up, to stand straight up, and to balance them and to make them fall. So there cannot be freedom with negotiation. In other words, freedom is not negotiated for. Freedom is not given. Freedom is taken by all means necessary. It means the same way that freedom was taken away from you is the same way you're going to have to recuperate it. Should I repeat that again? The same way that your freedom was taken from you, it is the same way that you need to regain that freedom. And so it means America, France, Germany, or the West in general never engage in negotiation in order to colonize Africa. When they went to Berlin Conference, where they actually balkanized Africa into small groups of people that can be controlled and dominated, they've never negotiated with African people about the conditions under which African people were going to need to be enslaved and to be colonized. They just forced their way through into Africa with guns, with violence, and they subjected Africans, they conquered Africans, they oppressed Africans, and they colonized Africans. Right? It was through violence that we were conquered. It was through violence that we were dominated and oppressed and indeed colonized. So that domination will never gonna end with you negotiating with the very same people who have depended upon your subjection for them to build their world. Your sufferings or your oppression is never going to end properly by you engaging in a negotiation with them. Because what else do they want from you except dominating and enslaving you? We need to think about these African people. We need to think about this reality. And we need to be clear whether we want freedom or we just want to be having symbols that have no substantial meaning in our lives. Symbols that have no values in our lives. Because there's a difference between symbol and substance. A symbol stands for a particular substance, right? But it happens sometimes that a symbol can lack its substance, and that becomes a symbol without substance. And we having a freedom which is a symbolic freedom because it was signed on papers. But that freedom has it doesn't have substantial values in our everyday as common African people, right? The reason is very simple. Look in your communities, the mega or the big corporations in your countries, who own them? People like you, no. Your government, I bet no. Right? It's European industries. It's actually they are European industries. They are Western industries if they are not Chinese industries. So what do we control by being freedom? By being free, actually. What do we really control? We don't control our land. In fact, we are even running away from this land. Everywhere in Africa, when you go into churches, in mosques, you find young people praying every day for God or for Allah to give them a visa so that they can run away from Africa and go to France and Germany to settle there. But because sometimes Allah or God doesn't respond to that prayer, they decide to cross the Mediterranean water by themselves so that they can join Spain and Italy, and you know the results. In most cases, we see the bodies floating on the waters because Africans wanted to run away from Africa in order to settle from Europe. But after you have demanded for freedom, after you have asked for freedom, after you have gained that freedom, what then is preventing you from enjoying your resources, your gold, your diamonds, your platinum, your oil, your resources that you have under your feet? What is preventing you? It's simply because it wasn't a real freedom. It was a symbol of freedom which does not have its substance, because freedom cannot be negotiated. Freedom cannot be given. Freedom must be taken by all means necessary. And the way it should be taken is the same way it was taken away from you. Was it taken by negotiation? No. But how do you actually want to engage in the negotiation with your oppressor for your freedom, which was taken by force and by violence? It's only by force that we need to take back our freedom. Right? This is the point here. So this is what a revolutionary freedom style emphasizes. It doesn't engage in negotiating with your oppressor. It doesn't engage in accommodating the will of your oppressor, because that will is nothing different than oppressing and dominating you. But it's only focusing on fighting by all means necessary to eradicate the conditions of slavery, to eradicate the conditions of oppression upon your life, in order to re-establish your own order and your own value system. Because revolution by its means is simply revolution by its nature, it simply means the change of values. When you want to go into revolution, you are aiming actually just to change the value systems that actually govern your life or rule your life and your reality. And that is what actually we need to do. We need to choose a revolutionary freedom style, which means if people are oppressed and they want to become free and they don't want to negotiate, they must engage into a revolutionary freedom style. Revolutionary stands for transformation of values. Revolution doesn't mean vandalism, or doesn't mean barbarism as we have witnessed it from European people. No, revolution means transformation of values. We're having a system now because we decided to negotiate for freedom during the 1960s. Now we have a system in place which has actually put into a leadership position in our states some kinds of puppets who are working like employees of the Western enterprises, which is the so-called African countries. Because one thing have to be well understood here: the African states were not established by poor people or by ordinary people like you and me. African nations as states were established by powerful people from Europe, and they established these states to be functioning as corporations or enterprises that had to be producing the wealth for the European countries. And in order to effectively managing these enterprises, they found some types of Negroes who have no attachment to the African value systems, some Negroes who are inclined more in negotiating for their own freedom than fighting, right? And these are the Negroes who had to lead Africa, but they were working just like managers of enterprise being appointed by the West. That is why we don't find anything. We don't actually benefit from the system. You are born, I don't know how old are you, you are born, you have been facing difficulties in your life. But the land in which you are living is the land where, flows or where flow honey and milk. But you don't benefit from honey and milk that flow in your land, right? The real paradise is right here under our feet. But how do we benefit from this? That's a difficulty because we chose to negotiate with those who were willing always to oppress us. Now it is time for African people to embark in a different journey. Never been too late, right? If we, as I said from the beginning of this presentation, if we are, we are sure about the future that we want to build for ourselves before the end of this 21st century, we need to embark in a different style of seeking our freedom, which is not really looking to get the approval of the oppressor or get the recognition of the oppressor or get to be awarded freedom, awarded what we call the Nobel Peace Prize. But we need to embark in a journey that is aiming to do everything by ourselves and for ourselves by all means necessary. And that is the revolution that we're talking about. It doesn't seek to negotiate. It doesn't expect freedom to be given, but it fights and seizes the freedom. That is a revolution that we need to do now. And that is the only thing that will put us back again in the driving seat of our destiny as African people. That's the only system that will give us a freedom that is not coming as a symbol, but that really is, that has the substance of freedom, which is the power. You cannot be free if you don't have the power. We need to understand this. You cannot be free if you don't have the power. In other words, a desire for freedom is directly a desire for power and responsibility. It means you need to be able to educate yourself. You need to be able to feed yourself. You need to be able to clothe yourself. You need to be able to defend yourself. And this is a journey we need to partake now if really we are serious about the freedom that we're talking about. Because we hear people here and there talking about freedom, looking for freedom, but they still want to negotiate for that freedom. No, freedom comes with a price. And if we are serious about freedom, we must go for revolution. And when we choose a revolutionary style for freedom, we must stand for price. There is nothing in life that we can get without paying the price. There is nothing in life that we can get without paying the price to get that thing. I have often heard African people talking about China in a way that they are making comparison to China. They say, well, Chinese people have made it. We can also make it. Indians are making it. Arabs, they don't have a lot of resources, but they are making it. We can also make it. It's good to talk about what other people have made. But you have to remember that don't envy something that other people have done if you don't know the amount of sacrifices they've paid to acquire that which they have, which you are envying. And secondly, if you are not ready to pay the price that is required for you to get what you see, which you envy from them. Should I repeat that again? Don't actually envy something that somebody has, if you don't know the kind of price or the sacrifices they've made to acquire that thing which they have, and if you are not even willing to pay that same price to get that which they have. It's very important. The question is, are we ready for freedom as African people? If we are looking at China as a model for freedom, are we ready to pay the price that the Chinese people have paid for them to have their own freedom? These are the questions that we need to ask. It's very important. If we want to develop Africa like France has developed, like Germany, like America, are we ready to pay the same price that French, Americans, Britons, Germans have paid for their own development which they have today? And we know what they've done, what kind of price they've paid. They've waged some kind of atrocious wars against other nations. They've plundered the resources of other nations. They have looted the wealth of other nations so that they can have the development which they have today. So you talking about developing Africa as New York. Are you willing or are you able to also invade other people, plunder the resources or loot the resources, oppress them for 400 years so that you can take the resources and build Africa? Question marks. So we need to find a different ways, and that is a revolution. And when we choose a revolutionary freedom style, we must be ready to pay the price. And this price, we have to pay it with everything that we have. We cannot talk about liberating Africa if we are not even willing to spend our little money to contribute to all those who are making necessary and meaningful efforts to bring change in the continent. Right? We spend our money in soccer. We spend our money in liquor. We spend our money in Jordans, in useless things that actually empower the corporations owned by your own oppressors. But how much money do you spend to further the agenda of African freedom? It's an important question. This show is brought to you by the African Continental Unity Party. Do you know what it is? It's a new political party that actually goes beyond the boundaries, that redefined Africa, not in the context that colonialists defined us, but in the context that we are supposed to be as African people, based on the first principle of Pan-Africanism, which is all African people, we are member of one family. Whether you are born in West Africa, in North Africa, in Central Africa, in Caribbeans, in North America, in Chinese, whether you are born, I don't know where, as long as you are an African person, you are a member of the global African family. So we are not being defined by these borders, these boundaries that were created at the Berlin Conference in 1885 and 1884, 1885 by oppressors. You know, we are Pan-Africanists, we are Pan-Africans, and we are redefining ourselves in the context of who we are, a global family. And we want to get rid of all these boundaries. That is why we have come up with this party, the African Continental Unity Party. If you have not yet joined us, this is a call for you to join us in this revolutionary movement where we believe that we will acquire our freedom by fighting by all means necessary, by engaging ourselves. We have a brilliant agenda, a beautiful agenda for the African liberation. It's only you who has to join us so that collectively we can work together and bring this agenda to other people and make it more impressive and more meaningful and impactful in the continent as well as in the diaspora. So don't sit back and watch at us to see where we are going, because we're going nowhere if you don't join us, if you don't support us, if you don't contribute, because this is an African agenda. It's not an elite party. Right? So African Continental Unity Party is a new political party across the continent of Africa that operates beyond the boundaries that colonialists imposed onto us. Our vision is to re-establish Africa as a global power base, because we believe that Africa has got everything. We have got the skills, we have got the manpower, we have got the resources, we have got all that we need, but we lack one thing, which is the power. And this power comes from our efforts to organize ourselves as a global community. Therefore, the African Continental Unity Party aims to organize African people, across the continent of Africa. Being organized, we have the power to make meaningful actions that will impact our lives forever. Dr. John Henry Clark told us that when people unite, even if they've united around a wrong objective, but the fact that they have united, they are able to alter the history, right? So even if the objectives for which we have united or we are uniting is not the good objective, but the fact that we are coming together to work collectively, we will be able to turn upside down, inside out, the reality of our life, which, by the way, is very ugly and not really impressive anyway. For over 60 years of African independence, our reality has never been good at all. So There's nothing that we will lose by changing this reality. So we need to change it right now and right here. We don't have to send this mission to our kids, our 4 kids, because they wouldn't know the world as we knew it. We are the only ones who are able to change this reality because we know the world in two faces. We have seen the world without smartphones, without smart TVs, without smart, I don't know, smart cars, a smart fridge, a smart whatever. We have seen that world. And we are seeing a world today where everything is being equipped with artificial intelligence. We have seen that world in which we are today. So the kids who are born after us, they have never had a chance to see the world in 1990s that we saw, that we lived in, whereby you could go to your neighbor, your fellow Africans, or your family members without necessarily booking an appointment. You go there, they welcome you, they give you a decent food, organic food. But today, there's nothing like that. For you to come to go to your neighbor, to come to me, you need to call me and book an appointment because we have cell phones. And sometimes we don't even visit each other anymore because we restrict all the interaction that we have on the cell phones. We don't have organic food anymore. We have a GMO food, junk foods that bring a lot of diseases that we didn't have in the 90s, right? And in the 80s. So this is a reality now. So the kids who are born from today, they don't have the perspective that we had in the 90s because we could have more patience in that time because you have to travel actually. If you want to speak to me, you had to come to me because there was no cell phones for you to call me. So you need to actually travel, be patient and come to me and interact with me. So the relationship was actually humane and organic. But today things are different. So if we don't lay the foundation for a revolutionary, because we are the only one who have seen this difference, this difference of paradigm. We have seen this world in two faces now. And we are the ones who can lay the foundation of a proper revolution that will keep the African DNA intact. Because with this nonsense of globalization, even if we don't know how to resist it, it's going to wipe on the face of this earth any cultural existence of African people, any meaningful existence of African people. It will transform all of us into little Britain, little British, little French, and little Portuguese, or sometimes little Chinese. And that will be a complete alienation of African people from the face of the earth. Is that what we wish? The answer is no. Therefore, we need to begin fighting. And in order to fight, we need to join an organization that actually have a vision to rebuild Africa as a global power base. And this is the ACUP, the African Continental Unity Party, as I'm presenting it to you now. I've never seen a party with the agenda that we have, with the vision that we have, and with the mission that we have. Most of the parties that we have are working according to the guidelines of colonialists. They are all nationalists because colonialists told them that you are restricted to this particular location or this particular prison. But we are not defining ourselves according to the mindset of colonialists. We are a party that transcends boundaries. So if you haven't joined us, please join us. Let's build this together. If you haven't joined the Ubuntu Solidarity Society, please join us. Let's invest in Africa together. It's very important. If you haven't joined the Free-Minded Pan-African Academy, please join us and get an Afrocentric education that actually gives you an African perspective, that opens your mind to look at the world as an African person. Because you're never going to succeed by looking at the world as European person while you are an African person. It's very important. Right? From wherever you are, if you are, I don't know, in Ghana, I don't know, in Nigeria, in Gambia, Uganda, Kenya, you can play a role in the development of this party, African Continental Unity Party, from your own communities. It's a party that works in the concept of community building and community development. And we're going to do this together because that's the reason why we have Ubuntu Solidarity Society, which is where we do investments to build our economy. That's why we have also, the academy to educate ourselves. And indeed, we have the political party to defend our economic interest. Because we do politics to defend our economic interest. I hope I have been helpful to you through this brief discussion. Thank you very much for your trust and for your interest in listening to me. It has always been a pleasure to be discussing with you the matters concerning our motherland and its development and its future and our collective future. So I am pleading with you to really support what we do, even by liking this video and sharing this video with the audience. It will help us a lot. Please do that. And also subscribing to our YouTube channel. And I say, before I depart, if you have two shoes, you need to sell one and buy a sword. If you have two trousers, you need to sell one and buy a sword, because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution is no longer on streets. This revolution is in the mind. Because if the mind has not been transformed, there is nothing we can do with our hands that will be meaningful to our lives. Peace and power to you, African family. Until then, thank you very much.